Disabilities podcast.
Chaos and comedy, where we explore life on the spectrum.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Jennifer.
In each episode, we dive deep into life surrounding neurodivergence, exploring the complex and often comical dynamics between society, family, education, and more.
Through building understanding, we hope to build a community, so like and subscribe for more chaos and comedy as we explore life behind the scenes of neurodiversity.
You know, we've been talking about how people, when we say that we're dealing with young people with invisible disabilities, like what that actually means when we say that. And because what we mean is that they have disabilities, but they don't present them.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, because that people are unaware of the disabilities that our young ones have, that they just get labeled something different.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. ADHD, autism with ADHD, we're starting to call it now. You know, even autism level 1. People, you know, the kids get labeled juvenile delinquents. They're going to be, you know, they're trouble. They don't have any home training. You just need to discipline your kid. You know, like you get all kinds of comments as a parent about, you know, like what's wrong with your parenting, and that's reflecting in your child. And, you know, that people, they just don't know that these kids most of the time they have disabilities, you know.
Is this the schools? Is it the neighborhood? I understand. I know
everything.
The neighborhood. It's everything. It's the neighborhood, but
Society.
Society as a whole?
Yeah. Because, you know, we, you know, just only a couple generations ago, children were to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't.
And then, you know, we went through the free to be you and me kind of, you know, 60s and 70s, but there was still community parenting, community supervising of children, you know. I mean,
Yes.
We're Generation X, so...
Yeah, no, that's real. Though.
I don't know if it was really community parenting or if it was we were just Lord of the Flies and we were like, you know, raising ourselves.
Yeah.
But still, like, any mom could come out in my cul-de-sac and be like, get your act together.
Right.
And we all went, "Ugh," you know, duck and cover, right? And in fact, it was worse if somebody else's mom came out.
Yeah. No,
and you were the one
well.
acting out, because then your mom was going to find out about it. So then it was like, now you're not only in trouble for what you did, but you're in trouble because you embarrassed your family for acting like that. And so, you know, in our generation, it wasn't a disability. It was no home training. It was, you know, whack them a few more times. You know, they need, you know, hard lessons. They need more discipline. They need God. They need whatever. You know, it was just always an external responsibility for why they acted the way that they acted. And anxiety wasn't talked about. Depression wasn't talked about. Mostly women were still, you know, the ones who suffered from those things. And mostly it was just, you know, she was nervous. She was always nervous. They didn't really give it like accurate labels and stuff. So, So they would just give her a Valium, you know, like I don't even know how many grandmothers of ours were walking around on Valium and wine.
Oh, I love my grandmother. She raised me, but that was a part of her life.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't, you know, people don't realize how really like close in history it was that women didn't know not to drink while they were pregnant, didn't know not to smoke when they were pregnant. I remember my mom talking about it and her being kind of, she was the weirdo. She was more like granola because she was like, you know, I shouldn't smoke when I'm pregnant. I shouldn't have anything to drink, blah, blah, blah. But I knew plenty of moms who were drinking wine and smoking at the same time. They really didn't really talk about even any of that type of thing. So if women had a problem, they were drinking, and the best they would get is some Valium,
Right.
and then they were like half knocked out all the time, sleeping all the time. It's probably why we were locked out of the houses. They said they were cleaning all the time, but how clean do you need to make the house,
It
They're
is.
probably napping.
It is right, and there's a cause and effect to everything. So when we see people now, we don't see the neighborhood or
No.
the village per se raising the kid anymore.
No.
So it's I see that kid's doing his.
It depends on your community, right? Like I see every culture is a little different. In your culture, in your community, the United States has different cultures across the United States, right? Like there's East Coast, there's West Coast, there's Pacific Northwest, there's Southern. Then within Southern, there's different types of Southern. And then within that, there's your little community and kind of what your community has collectively agreed is acceptable amounts of community supervision. And I notice, especially on the West Coast where we're from, not in Hawaii, but West Coast, particularly, my generation, your generation, we went from our parents locking us outside the house to we became helicopter parents. And we think that every success our child has is, we get to take credit for, and every failure they have, we're supposed to take the blame for. And, so bless your heart if you raised, some amazing children. I know you're taking credit for that, but actually, I've seen so many families, amazing, doing everything right. They had nothing that you could pick on as to why their kids ended up the way they ended up, in the external way, right? And those parents had kids who had issues.
Yeah.
And, so it's really arrogant and conceited for parents to walk around being like, yeah, I did that, because you're just like, you know what? I would just love for you to have a kid that you didn't have any control over.
Yeah.
Just so that we could reset your expectations.
Okay.
Because you know what? We all kind of went into this thinking we had control over it. It's just the ones of us who had kids who, went left that know the reality, and I'm not saying like that I'm one of those parents. But what I am saying is that I've known plenty of parents who have been everything that, should be the recipe for successful kids.
Right.
And they got anything but that.
Right. No, yeah. I think that as we lock ourselves in and there's no more village, we don't really know what's going on in anybody's houses.
No, and we're not.
But they label people all the time.
Oh, yeah. No, we're going to sit in our house and we're going to be keyboard warriors and we're going to judge everybody else's kids. We're going to take video. We're going to take pictures of your kid act in a certain type of way out there, and we're going to post it all over social media, and we're going to be like, hey, if these are your kids, you better get them under control. Yeah. And I'm just like, when did that become acceptable?
Yeah.
First of all, that's the same parent who'd say, don't take a picture of my child because that's like an invasion of their privacy, right? But they'll turn around and take a picture of somebody else's child if they want to post it on social media and they're not acting right. And then the other question I have is, since when did we stop having direct conversations with these children? Because I swear to God, I'm the only parent still out there who I'm not trying to post your kid on social media. Because I was raised where grown-ups actually have conversations with kids. Yeah. And that there's nothing wrong with that. I know how to have a conversation with somebody else's child and not threaten them, not embarrass them, not humiliate them, but also parent them. And you know what? I don't have a problem parenting somebody else's child, because here's what I feel like. People say this derogatory. They go, I shouldn't have to parent your child. Well, how are we going to teach them how to be independent and function without us if we don't leave them alone? Right? And if you think that your kid learned how to act because of all the time they spent with you, that they're somehow going to go off without you and always act right, you've lost your mind.
Well, I don't. Yeah, I know. I agree with you completely. I don't think we allow our kids to do anything. I think, as a
No,
matter of fact,
they have a chaperone
yeah,
100% of their life, and then we send them off to college, and then we're surprised when they're coming home from college, not making it past their first year. We're surprised when they're, getting drunk beyond drunk, and they're having horrible things happen to them. They have no safety skills. They have no survival skills, and then we're surprised why can't young adults, these kids, they're not adulting until they're 30.
right.
I'm like, well, you didn't give them a chance to make mistakes when the mistakes were little. When the mistakes were, I got in a fight with my friend, in the neighborhood, and then the parents came out and said, and broke us up.
Right.
Now we don't have that opportunity till we're 20 years old, and guess what? Now we're catching a charge because it's assault.
Well, the parents don't allow you. As a matter of fact, they say don't speak to anybody but to me. And if they come out, they say don't talk to my child.
Yeah, don't talk to my child.
Don't talk to my child.
Why were you
Don't
talking to my
communicate.
child?
Yeah, I'm the parent. I will do that, but we let our kids out there. But then when they interact with someone, we don't allow that interaction to actually come through. Well, it's been many times where I was said, "Here's my name. Give me a call."
Right.
You
Oh,
have
yeah,
an
yeah.
issue, call me.
Yeah. I mean,
Here's mine if you
God
have a problem with
forbid, you, say, I'm going to go knock on their door, which I'm going to do, and I still do, because I'm not going to subscribe to, we're going to all parent in a vacuum in our own little home and then think that our children are going to be equipped for society. So you're going to get me at your door, and I'm going to be like, how can we solve this problem? Because it's not your kid and it's not my kid. It's not your kid against my kid. It's not my kid against your kid. It's our kids live in this community together. And we as adults need to teach them how to get along with people that they don't get along with. Because that's part of the problem, is that, the society right now is having difficulty with allowing themselves to even be in the same space with people that they don't like, they don't get along with, they don't agree with. And then we're trying to raise our kids and we're not teaching them how to get along with, how to, it's just so they're all aggravated. They're all, you're wrong, I'm right. It's very polarizing. And then they teach their kids to be that way. Instead of just being like, you know what, buddy, there's going to be people in the world, there's going to be kids in the world where they're just not your favorite person. That's okay. But that doesn't mean you're disrespectful. So if you don't like that guy, but he's playing with your friend that you do like, then you got to make a choice. You either decide to tolerate the kid that you don't like, so you can play with a friend you do like, or you decide not to play with either one of them because it's just not worth it to be around that kid that you don't like too much.
Which is what we don't talk about. And I like that. Thank you for mentioning that, because when you have a kid who's on the spectrum, who has these, they don't interact or communicate the same as the other kids.
Right. And nobody, I mean, that's just a whole nother level. That's just a whole nother level, because God forbid you say, hey, my kid has autism. And what that looks like is that he's going to be really straightforward. He's going to be really black and white. I know he's 12. So it comes off offensive. It comes off rude. The things that your child has already learned how to do, the things your child has, are just innately picked up, my kid doesn't do. And he's learning and he will get there. But, please understand, he's not aware of how that feels to your child, because he doesn't have those same feelings. He doesn't receive information the same way your child receives information. He doesn't receive emotions the same way your child receives emotions or feelings or anything like that. So he's learning and we're teaching him. But, it would be super helpful if you would not tell your child to just stay away from my kid. because then my child doesn't get the opportunity to learn how to, because what I would rather is that your child go, hey, dude, that hurt my feelings. Did you mean to hurt my feelings? Call them out, because a lot of kids on the spectrum, they to society standards, they sound rude. They're just like, so I sound that way,
Yeah.
like, because you're direct, and society is very sensitive depending on what community you live in. You can live in a community where like that is just normal and everybody talks that way. But you can also live in a community where everybody's really soft and really sensitive. And if your kid lives in that community and is super direct, then everybody's like, they're bossy, they're rude, they're mean. That's how kids interpret it, who aren't on the spectrum. And so they will go, I don't want to hang out with him, instead of just calling him out and just being like, hey, dude, you don't have to be mean.
Well, and it's because the parents, when they come home and you talk to that child then says what happened. And because that parent, and not trying to offend anyone, they're ignorant of that child. They don't understand that child has what we call our invisible disability.
Well, nobody
so
wants to understand. Nobody wants to try to understand the entire interaction anymore. Our parents came at it like too one-sided on the other side, where it was like, see it from the other person's perspective all the time. And we always felt like they never defended us.
Yeah.
So then what we did was, we did the opposite. We, our generation went, oh, we're going to always defend our child because we never felt defended. And it's always the other person's fault. Both ways are extreme, and neither way is the best approach all the time. Which is why, again, could we have a conversation with all parties involved? Because I promise you, if you got both of those kids, yours and the other one, their mom and you, in the same space at the same time, stories change real quick. Because now I'm getting fact checked. I'm a kid, and I told my mom the way I was going to give me some sympathy, and I'm telling my mom the way that it felt to me. But then if that kid's standing in front of me with his mom, that other kid's going to be like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. But you said this. And then that kid's like, and then their mom's like, did you say that? And then you're having it in real time. And the kids are learning, first of all, this is how you have a respectful conversation. You facilitate the kids learning how to have that conversation. So when they become grown-ups and they go to work, they can have a disagreement with a coworker or a disagreement with a boss, and it's not the end of the world. They already have those skills. It's not anxiety. It's not, an epidemic of, I feel scared all the time. My boss is really scary. My boss is really mean.
Yeah.
Your boss is running a business, and your boss probably has a lot of communication skills and is getting to the point, and you're really soft and you haven't learned how to have conversations that are uncomfortable, where you might be wrong, where you might get called out, where, you might learn something, because we shelter our kids from that. And it makes the kids who are like on the spectrum or ADHD or, a combination of things, it doesn't help them grow, and it doesn't help the kids who are dealing with differences grow. Parents aren't saying, hey, before you just decide that kid's a jerk, has it occurred to you, maybe they have a disability? That's the first thing I say to my kids all the time. Like, they have to convince me a kid doesn't have a disability if they're acting a certain type of way.
Yeah.
And I know it drove Savannah crazy. She was always just, she'd start to complain about a kid, and I'd be like listening, and I'm like hearing different cues where I'm like, that sounds like one of mine. And then I'd be like, well, honey, maybe they have a disability, And she's like, no, they're just rude. Okay, but that thing that they said, this way that they acted, that thing that they did, those are all symptoms of, some of these disabilities, remember? And she'd be like, ugh. So, granted, everybody doesn't, have the background I have, and everything, but you don't even have to have that. And before I knew what specific cues kind of like set off red flags for me, That's how I would approach it with my kids in the beginning, because I was like, can we like try to come at it from a why did they act like that? Why would they say that? Place of understanding, like, and teach our children to come at a problem from a place of confusion, inquisition, problem solving, not they're a bad person because they were rude.
Yeah.
Well, why were they rude? Why do you think they were? What do you think was going on? Do you think they were frustrated? Do you think that they were having a bad day? Sometimes people just have bad days or whatever. You go through those kind of problem solving, but our kids aren't learning that. And then our invisible disability kids, it's weird because the more we are identifying these things and talking about them out loud, it's like the less we're actually talking to people who don't have kids like this at the same time. So if we have kids like this, we're understanding our kids more, but we're not talking to people who don't have kids like this to try to help them understand what they're looking at because it's invisible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard because we do it we're trying to get our school system to see and to understand these kids that way, and then but we don't
But our school system is structured
Yeah.
to sit down and shut up.
Yes.
Our school system is still structured for the stereotypical, female student who sits quietly and, takes verbal and visual instruction well.
Yeah.
And it hasn't fundamentally changed to accommodate just for boys. Like forget disabilities. We haven't even changed the structure of our schools in a meaningful enough way to accommodate for the difference between how girls and boys learn, which I'm probably going to get a whole bunch of controversy because God forbid I say there's a difference between boys and girls. But, scientifically, there's a lot of books about it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of research that's been done and everything's stereotypical, of course. There's going to be the girl that, whose brain is wired more like the way the boys are. And there's going to be boys whose brains are wired more like the way the girls are. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in general. I'm talking about stereotypically, school was designed for a little girl who sits and likes to learn, and boys, we're missing about 60% of boys and probably a good 10-20% of girls who need to move. And they need, and we're not even talking about disability. We're just talking about the way their brain is wired. And so, we haven't even made that change in school where we do project-based learning, where these kids are up and moving and interacting with the things that they're learning. We're doing less field trips, not more.
Oh, yeah.
We're taking all the extra services out of our schools. So we're going to library, PE, art, less, not more. Music, less, not more. Right? All the things that would help break up the day, that would help break up the rote, like most boring, hardest part of learning. And we're doing less of it, not more of it.
Yeah. But let's talk that out. Let's talk that out. All right. Because I don't think people understand what the day in that child's life is in the school setting. Oh my God. Get to school, maybe have breakfast, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
because that's its own thing, right? And the thing is, schools become a social service agency.
Yeah.
We're going to try to learn, but we have so many social services that we have to provide at school just to make sure that kids are able to learn that, because if they haven't eaten, then we've got to get food in them or they can't pay attention.
Yep.
If they haven't slept well, we got to let them take a nap before they can, function. Right. So we already have all these problems where kids in their families or in their communities or in their, personal lives are not even being set up for success to go to school. Mm-hmm. But then, within school, So you haven't had breakfast. You had a bad night's sleep. You've got a bunch of stress in your family. And come sit in this chair at 7 o'clock in the morning and listen to the Peanuts teacher talk to you. Because that's what it sounds like to them.
No.
They're like, oh.
For hours.
Okay. Yeah, hours.
For hours.
Yeah, because when you're in elementary school, it's the same teacher all day.
Yeah.
And, when it's middle school, you get to like at least get up every 45 minutes. But God forbid they do the 2-hour block.
Yeah.
Oh.
2-hour block. You get it all day.
Yeah.
You go
3 classes,
three
maybe.
classes, 3 hours.
2 hours apiece.
Most adults don't sit for that long.
I have ADHD. So, but I was raised Gen X and I didn't, I was just beaten into submission, no medication for me. So, I have learned how to accommodate for my struggles, right? And I'm old, so I'm tired now, so I can like hang out. I still, in a meeting, I have an hour and 15 tops. Hour and 15 tops where I can stay engaged with the meeting, the conversation, everything. And I'm having to do all these other things because I've learned how to, help keep myself in the moment. But, I just think about kids with ADHD, with autism, with whatever. Okay, autism, if it's not something they're hyper focused on, right? Which it's very few things because they get one thing and they're like, this is it. Everything else is like, you're killing me. And then ADHD, it's like, ooh, I'm super interested in this for 5 minutes. Ooh, I'm super interested in this for 10 minutes. And you're still talking about it 2 hours later, and I just want to die. Yeah,
your kid gets up, move around, talks. I have multiple times. Your child, he said, note came home from school, said your kid, instead of asking the teacher for help, went around and spoke to all the other kids in the classroom. And
to get the answer.
To get the answer. So
she got in trouble for cheating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I asked my child, I said, why did you go ask those
Why
kids
you go run around the whole room talking
around
to
the classroom? Why'd you ask them instead of asking the teacher? And she said, well, because they knew the answer. And she wouldn't give me the answer.
See, they're smart. They're smart. That's the thing. Like, you look at that and, 8 out of 10 teachers are going to be like, you're in trouble for that.
Yeah.
But I was like, the 2 who'd be like, brilliant.
No,
because that's problem solving. That's real world.
In a work setting. In a workplace setting.
Exactly.
You would get rewarded for doing that.
Because you know what? As your boss, I don't want you to come to me. Absolutely. I want you to go ask your coworkers, get the answer, figure it out.
Yes.
All I want to know is, did you solve the problem? Great. But in school, we're like, you can't do that. So the actual thing that she does naturally really well, she gets punished for. Mm-hmm. And the things that she doesn't do well naturally, she gets even more punished for. Like, is it any wonder why they're like, I hate school?
Yeah.
And they're brilliant, I mean, these kids have high IQs.
Yes.
These kids it's not an IQ impairment, but it is an access, it is a delivery, it is a, everything else. Because, like, one thing I have to explain to people, for me, I can't think, talk, and listen all at the same time. Those 3 things cannot occur at the same time. So if you want to have a conversation with me and you actually want my brain to engage, you're probably going to see me not looking at you.
I can't think, talk. What was the thing?
Think, talk, and speak.
Think, talk,
all
and
at
speak
the same time.
time.
No. It's like I look like I can. And that's the problem with these kids, right? We look like we can.
Yes.
But, because we're great at trying to fit in. We're not trying to not fit in. But,
Because we tell them at home, fit in.
oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, society, like they get bullied, they get made fun of, they get teased, they don't know why, but whatever, they're trying to fit in.
Yeah.
So, but I know that if I make eye contact with you, especially when we're growing up, somebody's talking to you, a grown-up's talking to you, if somebody's talking to you, it's disrespectful not to look at them, make eye contact.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for me, that feels very violating. It feels like you're like, how can I explain it? It would be to someone else as if, like, you're trying to talk to me and I'm literally like holding on to you, like I'm hugging you and you're just trying to have a conversation with me, but I'm literally like physically on top of you while you're trying to just have a conversation, right? Nobody's trying to have a conversation while I'm like on top of you. Mm-hmm. And so looking at somebody in their eyes feels very exposing to me. It feels very vulnerable inside my body. So my body has like an unsafe reaction to having to look at somebody straight in the eyes. And so, that's really a bummer because when the police are talking to you, I'm supposed to be looking at you straight in the eyes, and whatever my eyes are doing starts telling them certain things
that you're not intending to be saying.
Yeah, you're not trustworthy. You're hiding something. You're whatever. But actually, I can't because right now I'm really stressed out, and my body already with somebody I love, I feel unsafe.
Yeah,
looking at them in the eye. Now I'm in trouble because the policeman's talking to me. So my body feels completely out of control. From that, I feel completely out of control because now I got to look at you and then you want me to speak. You're going to ask me questions that I got to think about.
Yep.
And then you're going to ask me to speak. And guess what happens to all my words? Gone.
Yep.
Gone. So then I just start crying.
Which then
they get mad.
Leads that officer to believe
you did something wrong.
That you're trying to hide something. You did something wrong. You're trying to be deceptive.
Yeah. Yeah. And adults, like when you're a little kid and you act like that, the adults, that's the assumptions they come to. Your teachers, your school staff, those are the assumptions they come to. So you live a life where, your body I always called it my body betrays me. It doesn't, it doesn't cooperate with what I need to do in the moment, so confrontation used to be the worst thing in the world for me, just having a straight conversation, because for me, I am unsafe. So I'm either going to fight you to win, to get out of it, or I'm just going to shut down. If I feel like I'm trapped and there is no fighting to get out of it, then I'll just shut everything so here I sound so like well-spoken and eloquent and everything. And my mom used to get so mad at me, because she'd be like, oh, don't lose your words now. You had plenty to say earlier, when you were doing the thing that got you in trouble, right? And now all of a sudden you got nothing to say. You better start finding something to say.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I don't know. Yeah. That was what you heard. A lot of I don't know. Which then would make her more mad.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to say I don't know.
Well, that was all I could say.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't allowed to either, but...
Well, I'm saying, it was very similar, except for I
caught the
wet dishcloth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, believe me when I say that my mother's verbal lashings were equally painful.
So I would say even that's more.
I don't know if it's more, but it longer lasting in your self-esteem.
That's why
and
it's longer lasting. The corporal punishment, the physical comes and goes.
Comes and goes. Yeah.
That tongue
lashing. You don't have to take it as personal. I think, and I'm sure people will disagree with me, but I always said this because I've lived through various types of abuse in my life, and I've always said, just smack me, just beat me, just whatever, because I don't take that personal. That's just you lost control and you can't handle yourself. But when people say words, I absorb all of that. And that, will crush my soul for decades.
No, that's real.
That the healing from that is decades long. Whereas, I got thrown across the room. I'm like, that's not okay. Right? Like it's so black and white. If somebody throws you across a room, nobody's going to tell you had that coming. Nobody's going to tell you that you deserve that. Nobody's going to say that was okay.
Yeah.
But when people say things, people will be like, well, how'd they say it? Well, what did you do to make them say that? Well, why did they, it's this huge analyzation of, did you deserve it?
Did you deserve it?
Everybody agrees you didn't deserve to get thrown across the room.
Yeah. No, you couldn't have said it better. I had my 10th grade teacher told me that he didn't think I would make a good writer.
Yeah.
I'm 57 years old this year, and I still think about that.
Yeah.
I was 16 at the time.
Well, how many people say, oh, my 5th grade teacher told me I could do whatever.
Yeah.
And I believed that, and that's why I do this, right? Like, these teachers have adults, who matter to us. They have so much weight to the words that come out their mouth. And some of them know it and are careful with it. Some of them know it and are irresponsible with it. And some just don't even realize. There's so many adults who don't realize how much of what they're saying is being absorbed by the kids. And that goes for, like dealing with, their own children. They're talking about things, they're talking about news, or they're talking about, their interactions with friends or how they feel. And they're not even thinking about the fact that their kid's in the room.
Yeah.
They're not even thinking about the fact that, their kid's listening.
No.
And we talk about it, but
No.
people are doing it worse than they did before, because now your parents are on social media acting like children.
Yeah.
Really?
No.
Like, I'm seeing these moms and I'm just like, are you in middle school or is your kid in middle school?
Yeah.
Stop it.
It used to be where they used to be careful calling your kid bad, because then they become that.
Right.
It's like times 100 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. How your behaviors, they modeling it. And
they have so much
yeah.
more input from not the best places.
Yeah.
And that feeds into the whole, like, we're not having real person interactions. So everything is fabricated. It's on social media. It's, and then it's what we're hearing in our little vacuum of a home.
Yeah. So many of our kids, I've had this conversation with, what they are getting who they are supposed to be off of YouTube,
social media, Instagram.
So
here we are.
Yeah, they're being what they think they're supposed to be, because nobody's telling them who they're supposed to be.
Right.
So
Right.
So when
they're
you say
not
that,
seeing in real life what that looks like. And, when we were growing up, it was like, you guys know that's TV. That's not real life, right? And so we could make the distinction. It was like, oh, yeah, duh, they're in a studio. Those are actors. That's not a real story, blah, blah, blah. We can't say that.
No.
But even though it's not real life, because here's the thing. I don't know about you, but I'm not posting all my dirty laundry. Yeah. I'm not posting, all the shit that's wrong, in my life today. I'm not posting every bad feeling I have. I'm posting the good feelings I have. So if somebody looks at my social media, they could say, oh, she's so fake, right? But to me, it's, well, I'm not sharing my pain with the world. That's for my friends. But what it looks like is different than what my reality is. And these kids are seeing that. They don't know yet to go, nobody lives like that.
Yeah.
Right? They go, I want that life. oh, sweetie, that's not real life. Yes, it is. They're real people. That's, them following them through their life. Yeah, but honey, that's like a snippet.
Yeah.
That's like just a little, and then it's edited, and then this is cut out, and then this is, put in there to make it look different. Out of context is like huge now, right? Because we've learned how to take out of context and make it work for us.
Yeah. No, and then you do that with young people who are trying to figure out and fit in. And because of the disabilities that they have, because they don't present disabled. So, and it happens a lot, and I guarantee you, if they did a study on the young people who have, because probably in the last 3 to 5 years since COVID, we've seen an increase in juvenile crime.
Oh, it's a whole nother level.
And it's because you have, they did a study, they showed majority of them on the spectrum. On the spectrum, the other
ADHD.
kids, the other kids figured it out.
Yeah.
That these kids will want to fit in.
Yeah.
And then they get them to go to do it.
ADHD,
we've had several.
ADHD kids, because their impulse control is like non-existent, right? So it's easy to get them to do the thing that everybody else is like, I don't know about all that, And then the ADHD kid's like, I'll do it, without thinking like I might die.
Yeah.
And then, the autistic kids are not understanding in that moment that these kids are using them. Mm-hmm. Because they just see friend being nice to me. There's certain things I learned about what a friend, they smiled at me. They said they wanted to be my friend. They bought me something, so they want to be my friend because they learned certain cues meant you want to be friends. They still haven't learned that, if they get you to do this thing, that's not your friend.
Yeah.
It's really confusing, because that's gray area. Well, they smiled at me. They bought me this. They said they were my friend.
Yeah.
They are my friend.
They are my friend.
I've watched these disagreements happen between parents and their kiddos, where the rest of us are all sitting around going, that is not their friend.
Yeah.
And that kid is defending that person who is 100% using them.
Yeah.
Because they did these things that fit into what they were taught. And what we're trying to explain to them about what makes them not your friend is gray.
Yeah. They don't, well, that's
It's not a black, it's not a white,
Right.
it's not, it's like I said, the difference between verbal abuse and physical abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Like physical abuse is black and white. That's not right. But, we're trying to explain to them, like, what about that makes it not okay? And they're just looking at you like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's no gray. There is no, I think it's either it is or it isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very, very difficult to teach them those nuances that can keep them safe.
Yeah.
Right. And also, if they have invisible disabilities and they are aware of what's going on around them, they understand that they are different.
Yeah.
And they're trying really hard not to be. So if they're getting some form of acceptance, it makes them even more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because for, one of the first times they're feeling like they belong to something. And so they're going to protect that. Mm-hmm. And, they're desperate for it. And the other thing that we're finally talking about is their developmental age. Mm-hmm. Most of them, if not all, are, running a solid 3 to 5 years developmentally behind what their chronological age is. And so when you look at that and you see, okay, this 18-year-old really is like a 13-year-old.
Right.
But they have 18-year-old privileges. They can drive. They can vote. They can go to college. They can go live on their own. They can sign for loans.
Yeah.
They can do all kinds of things. But we wouldn't let a 13-year-old do those things.
Nope, we would not. But
developmentally, that's where they're at.
That's where they're at, and we send them out.
Yeah.
We send them out, and we go, again.
Well, I guess they'll figure it out.
Because they present adult, and they're not.
And they're trying to fight for it, too. You know what I mean? Like, that's the additional challenge for the families is that within your family, they're fighting you. because they're like, I'm 18. All my friends can do this or can do that. And, you know, they get tired of being told that their disability, it makes them different, that they can't do this because their disability. You know, they don't want to hear that as a teenager any more than any other teenager wants to hear no. So, you know, because they're still like 13. So they're still like defiant and very teenagerish, right? And I think the hardest part about it is if you can make it to 30 with these kids, you're not going to see a whole big difference between, you know, a 30-year-old high-level autistic kid, 30-year-old ADHD kid, and, you know, a 30-year-old typical kid. The difference is going to be how they got there.
Yeah.
But, you know, by the time you're 30, 35, like 5 years developmentally doesn't make a difference anymore. Right. But growing up 5 years, 3 years, it's a big difference.
Yeah, but can you catch up if you remain undiagnosed? You don't learn those skills to how to navigate it, not whether in school or in your personal life. Can you catch up?
It just depends how sheltered you are. Like, if you get kicked out there, you'll learn the hard way. The consequences are deeper. So I always say if you survive at that point, because at that point you're looking at a lot of risk, right? Because now we have adult consequences for teenage type behavior. And so, you know, they can easily end up in drugs and alcohol. They can easily end up in trouble with the law. They can easily end up on the streets. You know, they're just so at risk for all those things, and they come with adult consequences at that point. So if they survive to 30, they'll survive it through that process, right? But, you know, are they in jail by 30? Are they on the streets by 30? Are they in the throes of addiction and mental health crisis now because we've added that to everything else? Yeah, absolutely that happens. And then if you keep them sheltered, right? So let's say you're like, oh, shoot, I just found out. Like that happened to me, you know, with my third one, you know, we really didn't know what we were dealing with.
Yeah.
And we just kept struggling to figure out. We knew some of the things, but not all the things. By the time we found out he had autism, he was 24 years old. So good news, bad news, you know, he was going down those roads. Absolutely. You know, all the danger stuff, you know, because he was playing with all the fire.
Right.
But it was still early enough where I could still kind of get a hold of him, and I could be like, hey, you have these things. This is what it means. And this is how you will get there. Like, that's the good news. You're going to get there. It's not going to stop you from being, you know, any different necessarily than any other 30, 35-year-old. But we've got some backfilling to do, buddy. We've got some backfilling to do, you know? And so he's learned part of the way with the hard way. And then, you know, now we're in a supportive type of period of his life where we're supporting him, but we're kind of, even though he's, you know, 26, we're like treating him as though he's 16, 17, 18, 19, in that range, trying to launch, trying to learn how to do those things so that he gets that support that he's ready for, but he's not quite there yet, but he's ready for it, you know? So it's like a combination because, yeah, he learned some things the hard way, but also we can, you know, give him a supportive environment. Some parents might find out, like, you know, towards the end of high school, well, that was savvy. You know, we learned, you know, as she's going to college, getting ready to go to college, oh, you have autism. And so with her, you know, it helped her understand, like, oh, so that's why I do this. And it helped us understand. So when we approach things with her, I didn't want to isolate her. Some parents might panic, you know, they might be like, well, you can't go to college. You can't go out there. You're vulnerable. You're at risk. It's too scary. You're not ready, you know. But that is probably the worst decision.
No.
Like literally, yes, it's scary. However, you can do it supportively,
Yeah.
you know, where you're still giving them some autonomy, you're giving them the ability to start being the adult that chronologically they are, taking into consideration developmentally they're still struggling with concepts and with, you know, responsibility and making, you know, decisions, and you know, they're still trying to navigate social interactions and things like that. So, you know, but it takes work. It takes a lot of work. If you get early intervention, you don't have to deal with that. You know, like, I'm just going to keep going back to that. Life's not as hard if you take care of these things when they're little.
Well, I think that's a concept that, as a parent, in whether you have a kid who has an invisible disability or not, you have to be aware of. You got to let your kid grow up. I'm not suggesting letting them run around in the middle of the street, but if you don't allow them to figure out how to, especially conflict, if they can't figure out conflict in the confines of what most 7 to 8 year olds do in their community, then what's the expectation when they're 3 times that age, when they're 21 and they're having conflict, which is why I think we see a lot of violence.
Why we see violence. It's why we see the keyboard warriors. It's why we see, you know, people in certain communities who are, you know, unable to really work effectively. You know, they job hop from one job to another, to another, to another, constantly, you know, frustrated. They think that they should get paid $100,000 just coming right out of college because they're, you know, they're great students, and nobody ever told them that, you know, working is totally different than going to school, and being a great student doesn't make you a good worker. You know, and you got participation trophies because you showed up. And now, you know, it's not just about showing up every day. You got to show up on time.
Yeah.
You got to show up and actually do good work. People are going to be competing with you. People are going to do better work than you.
No, that's a strong word. You got to be careful using it.
I know.
That competing.
I know. You know, but it's hilarious to me because it is. It's like, here we're like raising them till they're 18 and we're going, oh, it's okay. You know, just don't make them compete. You know, everything should just be, everybody should make the team. Huh? And then we get them at work, and then we're having to, you know, deal with them feeling like it's an assault on their everything that, you know, the supervisor dared to tell them that they weren't good at that, or they need to work on that. You know, if they get a review that isn't, you got 5s across the board. If it's like, well, you got some 3s and 4s, they will be crushed and be like, you know, I'm the most horrible person in the world. I'm terrible. I shouldn't do this job. Or they'll lash out and say that they're being treated unfairly, you know, and it's like, it's actually just telling you how you can do better.
All right. And that's what your typical kid, when you have a kid dealing with that and they're on the spectrum and understand, you've got to allow them to work that conflict and to figure their way through it, because it's almost. But
you have to coach them.
You got to coach them, because if you don't, there's nobody who's going to coach them once they're 19, 20 years old.
No.
Nobody's going to coach them. They're going to be that kid or that young person.
They're going to be the adult who says horrible things at work, who lashes out, who offends people, who, you know, and it's frustrating for them.
Yeah.
You know, they can be brilliant at their job, but then they can't communicate with their coworkers. Then you've got just typical kids who can't communicate with their coworkers. It's just a mess.
Yeah. It is.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thanks for listening. Please come back. Please comment, like, and share. And if you want to reach out to us, connect with us on social.